Bakhtiar Sonov and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Donald Trump doubles down on bringing Greenland under U.S. control, drawing sharp warnings from European leaders. Britain has approved plans for China to build a major new embassy in London, despite security concerns raised by politicians and activists. And U.S. President invites more leaders to Board of Peace for Gaza. Azerbaijan accepted the invitation. The World Economic Forum is underway in the Swiss town of Davos. U.S. President Donald Trump attended where he addressed the forum. Orkan Amashov joins us with details. Orkan, with President Donald Trump's speech at Davos Forum, what key messages were delivered and how our global political and business leaders are reacting to his presence this year?
Hello, Bakhtiar.
Hello.
The building behind me, President Donald Trump delivered his highly anticipated speech here at the 56th World Economic Forum here in Davos. Well, effectively lambasted all the European leaders, from Switzerland to Germany, from France to UK, saying that the United States is in a position actually to control everything, to punish all the actors, and the United States has played an important role, is far more powerful than it was back in 1945. This speech probably is going to go down in the annals of history as one of the most consequential ones. Some of the points here President Donald Trump made today were the reiteration of their earlier statements. Effectively, he's saying that the rule-based order is over, and the United States, by means of application of punitive tariffs, is capable of sorting out all sorts of problems. He criticized Switzerland. He said that Switzerland earned $41 billion on United States. He's effectively saying that the preceding economic relationship between United States and European Union and individual European countries were very beneficial to the continent, to Europe, and US has not really received proper treatment from the European countries, and this is going to change. I would like to highlight three essential points, and those essential points go to the very center, to the very essence of the current world order, which is effectively collapsing and eroding before our very eyes. First of all, Ukraine. No longer going to be protected by the United States, as we understand. Number two, in terms of Greenland, it's very clear. President Trump is saying that no European country, no individual European country, and cumulatively all the European countries are not in a position to protect Greenland from Chinese or Russian incursion. Therefore, the United States of America should take decisive actions and assume physical control. This goes against everything that we have known about international law. It goes against the entire essence of Europe-US partnership. But Donald Trump is saying that old world order is over. A new world is beginning to emerge, and in fact has already emerged in many ways. What is he saying in relation to trade war between the European Union and the United States? He mentioned something about President Emmanuel Macron. What Trump is saying, by means of applications of tariffs, 200% tariff levied on France, he will be able to achieve whatever he wants to achieve. There was a very defiant, flamingly defiant speech, and I think that in the history of transatlantic alliance, it will define the rupture, not the beginning of the rupture, because the rupture has begun a long time ago, but its clear manifestation. And actually this rupture, this crisis, has been taken to a completely new level. It's a very historic moment, Bakhtiar, and we are presence of absolutely seismic developments. There's no such a thing as transatlantic alliance, and after this particular speech, in my humble opinion, and in the opinion of many analysts that I've spoken to today here in Davos, Switzerland.
Orkan, what are your views about President Donald Trump's Board of Peace for Gaza?
It's a very important moment, Bakhtiar. He effectively invited all the, I think around 60, more than 60 individual heads of state government to join this Board of Peace regarding the Middle East peace process, regarding Gaza issue. UK and France have not accepted because on that board, Trump wants to see leaders like the Russian President Vladimir Putin and other leaders, and European Union, individual European countries cannot accept it. But a number of countries accepted this particular application. What is very interesting about it, I think that continental countries, including UK, which is not a member of the European Union, were expecting President Donald Trump to accept UN-led peace process regarding Gaza. But this board effectively means that alternative structure will be created, and that structure will be governing the process in Gaza. This is something European countries are not in a position to accept. At least this particular rejection is coming from Germany and France in a very clear way. Italy is displayed a different point of view. Well, Azerbaijan has received such an invitation and accepted it, and it is very likely that tomorrow, Bakhtiar, there will be a very important meeting involving President Donald Trump and President Aliyev, as I'm being told on the grapevine, on the basis of information that's circulating in the air here in Davos.
Okay, we're grateful to you. Thank you very much for the latest developments from Davos. Thanks a lot. U.S. President Donald Trump has doubled down on his push to bring Greenland under U.S. control, refusing to rule out force as he headed to World Economic Forum in Davos. European leaders have pushed back sharply, warning against intimidation and threats to sovereignty.
US President Donald Trump says there is no going back on his ambition to take control of Greenland. Speaking at the White House before his departure to the World Economic Forum, Trump said negotiations were planned in Switzerland and suggested a deal could still be reached.
Look, they need that agreement very badly with us. They really do. They fought very hard to get it, so I doubt that. But we'll see what happens. We have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. I'm leaving tonight, as you know, for Davos, and we have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. And I think things are going to work out pretty well, actually.
Earlier, Trump refused to rule out the use of force and warned of sweeping tariffs on European goods if allies oppose his plan, raising fears of a renewed transatlantic trade war and strains within NATO. In Davos, European leaders moved quickly to respond. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said the European Union stands in full solidarity with Greenland. French President Emmanuel Macron warned against intimidation and rejected what he called the law of the strongest.
We do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
European Union leaders have said that US tariffs linked to Greenland could trigger retaliation, including wide-ranging trade measures. Meanwhile, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen once again reiterated that she would not yield to Trump's demands and abandon Greenland.
Because this is about much more than ourselves. We can negotiate about everything: political, security, investments and economics. But we cannot negotiate about our fundamental values: sovereignty, the identity of our countries and our borders, our democracy.
Both the Greenlandic and Danish governments have repeatedly said the Arctic territory is not for sale and that its future can only be decided by its people.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has condemned the US President Donald Trump's threats to impose new tariffs over Greenland. Addressing the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday, von der Leyen said Greenland's future must be decided by its own people, warning that coercive measures undermine sovereignty and international law. She added that Europe is prepared to act if necessary, but prefers dialogue.
Threat of additional tariffs for security reasons is simply wrong. We now live in a world defined by raw power, whether economic or military, technological or geopolitical. And while many of us may not like it, we must deal with the world as it is now. We are at a crossroads. Europe prefers dialogue and solutions, but we are fully prepared to act, if necessary, with unity, urgency and determination.
Tensions between the European Union and the United States are rising as Brussels signals it will not bow to economic pressure amid a widening dispute over trade and sovereignty. European leaders are now weighing their options from diplomacy to retaliation. Our William Danslow reports from Brussels.
Addressing members of the European Parliament, Antonio Costa, the European Council President, has had a sharp message in response to these threats by US President Donald Trump that it's prepared to slap tariffs on 8 European powers should Greenland, this semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, not be handed over to Washington. Antonio Costa, addressing MEPs, said that they will defend itself from any forms of coercion and that tariffs imposed by the US are incompatible with a trade deal that was brokered between the EU and US last year. Talking of that agreement, well, MEPs, members of the European Parliament, have decided to pause a decision to ratify that trade agreement on the basis of these ongoing tensions with Washington. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, has also commented, describing the threat of tariffs as being a dangerous downward spiral. The EU has tools in its toolbox to hit back at the US with the potential of imposing tariffs of its own, as well as conceivably using the so-called trade bazooka, a never-before-used instrument that would see it have the ability to impose even more stringent penalties on the US, including export controls. That will be the major topic of discussion when European leaders convene here in Brussels for an emergency meeting on Thursday. Now, when it comes to trade activity, well, the EU has maintained that in this geopolitical context, the need to diversify its trade partners has become more pressing as ever. And recently they have signed a historic, what they describe as a historic trade agreement with Mercosur, a group of South American nations, to create what's seen as the largest free trade area. Now, it's been heralded as a win-win move, but there is huge opposition to this, and that was reflected in a vote on Wednesday that really saw Mercosur be sent to the top European courts to see if indeed this trade agreement complies with European law. Real questions now, what happens next? Can this deal indeed be implemented, or will it have to wait for the court to make a ruling on it? That is something that could take months, even over a year, to be deliberated upon. William Denslow, Free News, Brussels.
US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday. During the World Economic Forum in Davos, he told reporters that the talks will focus on peace and the situation in Ukraine. Meanwhile, last week the Kremlin confirmed the plans to host Witkoff and Jared Kushner for discussions, though no dates had previously been announced. Over to Ukraine, where a Russian airstrike has left more than 1 million people in Kiev without power, hitting key substations linked to Ukraine's nuclear plants. Kiev says the attack risks nuclear safety and is being used as a tool of pressure. The strikes come amid renewed diplomatic efforts for peace, adding fresh tension to the conflict.
Ukrainians are having to continue to deal with freezing temperatures after a Russian airstrike on Tuesday left more than 1 million people in Kiev without power. The attack also damaged substations that carry electricity from Ukraine's nuclear plants. Kiev accused Moscow of using the risk of nuclear disaster as a tool of coercion. Ukrainian officials say Moscow used 330 drones and nearly 30 missiles, killing 4 people. 3 were in Zaporizhzhia and 1 in the Kyiv region. Other parts of eastern, southern and northern Ukraine were also hit. This was the second major strike on Ukraine's capital this month. Emergency crews are working around the clock to restore power and heating as temperatures drop to minus 13 degrees Celsius. President Volodymyr Zelensky said more than 4,000 buildings had no heating. Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Kuleba said 68 repair teams were working in the capital. More than 1,400 emergency heating centers have been opened for residents to warm up and charge phones. The International Atomic Energy Agency said several key substations were damaged. Power lines to other nuclear plants were also affected. Ukraine gets more than half of its electricity from nuclear energy. The agency added that the Chernobyl plant briefly lost all external power but was later reconnected. In the northern Chernihiv region, authorities said 87% of residents were left without electricity. Russia said it struck military, energy and transport targets. At the World Economic Forum in Davos this week, US and Russian envoys called talks on a possible peace deal positive and constructive. Zelensky urged Washington to increase pressure on Moscow, saying current measures were not enough. He said he would go to Davos if the US agreed to sign security guarantees and a post-war recovery plan. Ukrainian officials say in total, Russia has destroyed about 8.5 gigawatts of Ukraine's power capacity since late October.
European farmers are stepping up pressure on European Union leaders over the Mercosur trade deal. With key parliamentary votes approaching, protesters warn the agreement could threaten farming standards and livelihoods across Europe.
Farmers staged protests outside the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Tuesday, opposing the EU-Mercosur trade agreement as lawmakers prepare to vote on its legal future. Many of the demonstrators arrived with tractors, holding banners accusing the deal of unfair competition and lower agricultural standards. Police were deployed around the Parliament building.
We have lost a battle, but not the war. Today, the fight is to take this case to the Court of Justice. We hope members of the European Parliament will agree that the protocol used by Ursula von der Leyen is not the right one.
The head of France's main farmers' union urged EU lawmakers to seek a legal review of the Mercosur deal.
We are calling on all EU lawmakers to take up the issue, including perhaps some who might actually be in favour of Mercosur, because asking whether this agreement is or is not compliant with European law is a valid question, especially concerning the famous rebalancing clause.
The European Parliament will vote on Wednesday on whether to refer the agreement to the EU Court of Justice and suspend ratification. The deal, signed last weekend in Paraguay, could potentially become the EU's largest trade agreement after 25 years of negotiations. Lawmakers are also expected to vote on Thursday on a motion of censure against the European Commission regarding the Mercosur deal, the fourth such challenge to Ursula von der Leyen's administration. Farmers say protests will continue across France in the coming days as pressure grows on European leaders over the controversial agreement.
China has been given the green light to build an embassy in London. This comes after years of opposition and security concerns raised by some politicians. Our correspondent in Manchester brings us more.
Britain has approved plans for China to build a new embassy in London, which will become its largest diplomatic mission in Europe. The site near the Tower of London will cover about 600,000 square feet, according to planning documents, making it one of the largest embassies in the world. The decision follows 3 years of delays after objections from some British lawmakers, Hong Kong pro-democracy groups and local residents. Recent protests have taken place near the proposed site. The approval comes despite concerns raised by some UK and US politicians who said the location could pose security risks because fibre optic cables used by financial firms run underneath the area. In Parliament on Tuesday, Britain's Security Minister Dan Jarvis said China represents a national security risk, but told MPs the government had reviewed the embassy plans in full and taking steps to protect sensitive infrastructure.
We have acted to increase the resilience of cables in the area through an extensive series of measures to protect sensitive data. And I can confirm that, contrary to reporting, the government had seen the unredacted plans for the embassy. Based on all of this and our extensive work on this matter, I am content that any risks are being appropriately managed.
It is a host country's international obligation to provide support and convenience for the construction of diplomatic premises. The planning and design of the new Chinese embassy in Britain is a high-quality project. Its application and approval have strictly followed international diplomatic practice and local laws and procedures.
Following the approval, exiled Hong Kong and Chinese dissidents criticized the decision, while residents living near the site said they would pursue a legal challenge. A judicial review has now been announced to contest the government's decision. However, former UK diplomats and analysts Charles Parton told that embassies are not typically used as bases for intelligence operations, saying such activity usually takes place away from diplomatic missions.
Of course, it's worthy of concern because, as we know, China is probably the major hacking power and the major espionage power in terms of effort and resources currently in the world. So of course we must be concerned. The question is it possible to protect, if they occupy that site, is it possible to protect, let's talk about the cables to start with. Now, I'm not an expert in cables and technology, but I have talked to people who are, and their opinion is that it is not actually a threat, that you can manage the problem.
The decision comes ahead of an expected visit to China by Prime Minister Keir Starmer later this month. Some British and Chinese officials say the trip is linked to the embassy's approval. Also, their government has not publicly confirmed that. The move reflects a broader shift in UK-China relations over the past decade, from close engagement to a more critical stance, and more recently to efforts to stabilize ties. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Now we'll take a look at major stories from the region. Azerbaijan has accepted an invitation to join President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace. The US-led initiative aimed at overseeing Gaza's reconstruction is drawing both support and criticism from world leaders.
The United States has offered Azerbaijan a seat as a founding member of President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace initiative for Gaza. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev accepted Trump's invitation as a sign of the strong Azerbaijan-US partnership and recognition of the country's role in promoting regional and global peace and stability. The country now joins a growing group of nations, including Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Morocco's King Mohammed VI, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain have also confirmed participation. Other major powers, including Russia and China, have been invited. The Kremlin said President Vladimir Putin is still reviewing the proposal. France, however, has declined to join, prompting Trump to threaten high tariffs on French wine and champagne, a move Paris called unacceptable and ineffective. Analysts say Azerbaijan's invitation to the new Board of Peace underscores its growing regional and global significance.
Well, again, I mentioned that the country, the South Caucasus in general, thanks to Azerbaijan, might become a major pivotal Eurasian logistic hub. And in this particular regard, the invitation to this newly established, it is still actually kind of in the formation, Board of Peace, it's very important. Well, it still remains to be seen how this Board of Peace will develop, how productive will it be. Will it basically replace or supersede or supplant United Nations and other not very efficiently working organizations? It remains to be seen, but the very fact that Azerbaijan got the invitation obviously attached to its increased political weight of its regional, its importance, which is beyond regional.
The Board of Peace was created to oversee the October 2025 ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war in the Strip and to manage Gaza's reconstruction. The initiative was endorsed by the UN Security Council last November and is set to be formally launched at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Under the plan, the board will oversee a transitional Palestinian administration in Gaza, support efforts to disarm Hamas, and deploy an international force to train a new Palestinian police force. Trump has called the board a key platform for long-term stability in the Strip and has suggested it could one day replace the United Nations, which he often criticizes as ineffective. The board's charter gives Trump veto power over all decisions and allows him to remain chairman indefinitely unless he resigns or is declared incapacitated by a unanimous vote. Trump says he has invited 58 world leaders to join the board as part of his broader 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza.
On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, the state-owned fund of Azerbaijan has taken a new step with one of the world's largest real asset managers, a move expected to support long-term investment diversification and infrastructure development.
The State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan, SOFAZ, has signed a memorandum of understanding with Brookfield Asset Management to establish a long-term strategic partnership. The agreement was signed on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum and formalizes existing relations into a structured and expanded cooperation framework. Under the memorandum, the parties will explore up to $1.4 billion in investment and co-investment opportunities over the next 3 to 4 years, including potential direct investments in Azerbaijan. Priority sectors include financial and digital infrastructure, data centers, transport and logistics assets, energy transition and renewables, and real estate. The cooperation also provides for the creation of sector-specific working groups, joint site visits, and technical sessions to identify commercially viable projects. The partnership gives SOFAS access to Brookfield's global real asset management expertise, supporting more advanced and long-term investment strategies. For Azerbaijan, the cooperation is expected to support capital diversification and the development of sustainable infrastructure projects beyond the traditional energy sector. Brookfield Asset Management manages over $1 trillion in assets worldwide and operates across infrastructure, logistics, energy, and digital networks.
Oil production at one of the world's largest oil fields in Kazakhstan remains disrupted following a major infrastructure incident. According to Reuters, operations at the Tengiz field are expected to stay offline for several more days, raising concerns over exports and global oil markets. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has the details from Almaty.
Oil production at one of Kazakhstan's largest oil fields, Tengiz, is set to remain suspended for another 7 to 10 days. This is according to Reuters, citing sources familiar with the situation. The shutdown follows a major fire at a gas-fired power plant supplying the Tengiz oil field on January 18th. The blaze damaged key electricity systems, halting production at Tengiz and the neighboring Karlov oil field. Sources cited by Reuters say the halt could last at least until the end of the week and potentially into February. The agency also reports that 5 export shipments of CPC blend crude totaling between 600 and 700,000 tons have been cancelled for January and February loadings. Meanwhile, industry sources say the drop in output at Tengiz has not yet affected Kazakhstan's overall oil production. Crude output fell by 35% in the first 12 days of January compared to December levels, largely due to export constraints on the CPC pipeline. However, production has since rebounded at the major Caspian fields, including Kashagan and Karachaganak. A-News requested comment from Tengizchevroil, the project operator. The company declined to confirm or deny the information and said it would provide updates as the situation develops. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A-News.
The video report we will present now focuses on the modern use of modern robotic technology in mine clearance operations in Azerbaijan. It also highlights the importance of locally produced machines in addressing humanitarian risks and supporting post-conflict recovery.
Mine clearing machines produced in Azerbaijan by Improtex are showing how robotic technology supports demining work across the country. These systems, which have also been delivered to Ukraine, are designed to improve the safety and speed of mine clearance operations. Footage recorded under the framework of ANAMA presents the machines in real working conditions and showcases their technical strength and reliability. The advancements have also been featured at the UMEX 2026 exhibition in Abu Dhabi, which continues until Thursday and presents the latest in autonomous systems, robotics, artificial intelligence, and training simulation. Alongside the country's progress in robotics development, the threat posed by landmines in Azerbaijan continues. According to analysts, locally made robotic equipment plays a vital role in humanitarian demining and in supporting post-conflict recovery.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned to A-News for more.